Catalyst Game Labs has released a beta for an Alpha Strike match play format, and in this battle report, Geoff and I try it out. Unfortunately, we ran into some technical difficulties during filming, so I don't actually have video for the last couple of turns. I'll just give a summary at that point of how the game wrapped up. We decided on a skirmish-sized game, so we each had 250 points to work with. For my Free Worlds League Force, I took 3 fast jumpers that could all hit for 3 damage in Alpha Strike. A Wraith, TR5, an Eris, ERS-2N, and a Phoenix Hawk, PXH-9. Then I had a hard-hitting Hunchback C with a 12-inch movement profile and the ability to do 6 damage at medium and short range. A Trebuchet TPT-9N that matched the same 12-inch movement profile but with a 4-3-2 damage profile and the ability to overheat for an extra damage. And then my last unit was an Ontos Heavy Tank. The Chemical Laser variant can put out 7 damage at short and medium range, then blink for 1 damage at long range. Geoff brought a Draconis Combine Force with a No-Dachi NDA 2K. It combines a 10-inch move with a 4-3-1 damage profile, a high overheat of 3, and the ability to do melee attacks with TSM. Next he had a Lancelot LNC 2509, a heavy mech with a 12-inch move and a 4-4-2 damage profile. Panther PNT 14R is a little slow for a light mech, but it has its durability boosted by the Ballistic Reinforced Armor special ability. Then a Spider SDR 7K is a mobile striker. It has a 16-inch jump and can do 2 damage. Geoff's Lance of Mechs was joined by some vehicle support. First up were a pair of Demolisher heavy tanks. The Reinforced model has a 6-inch movement profile, can do 3 damage at any range, and benefits from the Ballistic Reinforced Armor special. And then a pair of Bulldog medium tanks are a little more mobile with an 8-inch movement profile, but only do 3 damage at short range and 2 at medium. They're also a lot less durable. The match play beta rules suggest a 3x4 or 4x4 table for the skirmish-sized games. We went with a 4x4 for this game. The format has player-placed terrain. First up, we needed to decide on which type of terrain would be the overall theme of the table. There's a table to roll on in the rules, but because of the terrain pieces that I had from the Alpha Strike box and the tokens pack, we decided that light industrial would be the best theme choice for our battle. Geoff and I then alternated placing buildings and other bits of terrain until the table was pretty full. At this point, we didn't know which objective we'd be playing with, so we were both kind of just filling up the table rather than trying to tailor it to any particular mission. And as you can see, the number of terrain pieces we had to place for light industrial ended up resulting in a pretty densely packed board. With terrain placed, we rolled for our deployment and objective. For deployment, we would be moving onto the board. Our objective was an objective raid. We would each place 3 objective tokens that our units would try to go and pick up and then carry back to our home edge. Each one we got back to our home edge would give us 5 victory points, and we needed 10 victory points to win the game. Geoff opened up turn 1 by moving his Demolisher onto the board on the right-hand side. Then I jumped my Phoenix Hawk forward to hide behind a large building. Geoff moved his other Demolisher next to the first one. I jumped my Eris next to the Phoenix Hawk to hide behind the same building. Geoff moved one of his Bulldogs onto the map, closer to the center of his edge. Then I had my Wraith move onto the map and hide behind one of the smaller towers. Geoff continued to use the buddy system for his vehicles and moved his second Bulldog next to the first one. I moved the Ontos onto the board from the middle of my edge. Geoff then had his Panther sprint towards the woods on the left side of the board. And I moved my Hunchback up on the same side. Then Geoff's Spider sprinted halfway across the board and hid behind a building. We had messed up our initiative order a little bit here, and the Spider should have gone before my Hunchback, but it really didn't matter much. His Lancelot moved on towards the center of the board. Then Geoff's No-Dachi moved next to the Panther near the woods on the left side of the map. And then as the final move of turn 1, I had my Trebuchet sprint forward near the woods on the right side of the map. Geoff's Lancelot took a long-range shot at my Hunchback, and it missed. Then my Ontos took a long-range shot at one of his Bulldog tanks, and it missed too. Then Geoff intentionally overheated his No-Dachi to kick in its triple strength Myanmar. After the first turn, our score was unsurprisingly tied at 0-0. Just like the first turn, turn 2 started with Geoff moving one of his Demolishers forward. Then I jumped my Phoenix Hawk next to my rightmost objective marker. Geoff realized he had accidentally given his Demolisher a speed boost it didn't have, so he adjusted its position back and then moved his second one up next to it. Then I decided to jump my Eris next to the objective that I had towards the center of the board. Geoff moved one of his Bulldogs forward to take cover behind a building. My Ontos slowly advanced towards the center of the board. Geoff's second Bulldog moves up next to the first one, staying just outside of medium range from the Ontos. I decided to have my trebuchet just walk through the woods in order to keep the building between it and Geoff's demolishers. Geoff has his Lancelot move out of hiding and towards the Eris so that it can open fire on it. Then his Panther moved towards the center of the map and took cover behind a building. I decided I wanted to make sure I'd be able to claim the center objective, so I jumped my Wraith there next to the Eris so that as long as either one survived I'd be able to pick it up. Then Geoff moved his Nodachi towards the center of the board so that I could take part in the fighting. And he jumped his spider next to his objective that was near the center of the board. And then as the final move of turn 2, my Hunchback advanced and got within short range of that spider. Geoff's Lancelot opens fire on my Eris, and it hits with enough to deal 2 damage. Then his Nodachi joins in, and it deals 2 more damage to the Eris. Then his Bulldog tanks open fire on my Eris. The first one misses with everything, and then the second one does too. Then Geoff's spider targets my Hunchback, and it misses too. His Panther joined in against the Hunchback, and it hit with everything for 2 damage. To wrap up his shooting, both of his demolishers took long-range shots at my Ontos. First one missed with everything, and then the second one missed with everything too. I opened up my shooting for the turn, with my Phoenix Hawk taking a shot at one of his demolishers. It dealt 2 damage. My Eris returned fire at Geoff's Lancelot. It dealt 2 damage and scored an engine hit. Then my Wraith fired at the Lancelot, but everything missed. And then my Trebuchet targeted the Lancelot too, but its missiles and lasers missed. My Ontos took a medium-range shot at Geoff's Nodachi. It dealt 2 damage despite it having cover. And then for my last shooting of turn 2, my Hunchback opened fire on Geoff's spider. It dealt 3 damage with its attacks. After turn 2, our score was still 0-0, but my Eris and Phoenix Hawk and Geoff's spider had all picked up objective markers. To kick off turn 3, Geoff sprinted his spider to a spot on his board edge where it would be hidden by a large building. After the game we realized this probably shouldn't have been allowed because there is a prohibition on sprinting units interacting with objectives, but we had both missed that. I jumped my Phoenix Hawk with its objective back behind a building. Geoff moved one of his demolishers forward. Then I debated a few options for my Eris, but I ended up jumping it right next to the Phoenix Hawk behind the building. Then Geoff moved his other demolisher up, and I continued advancing my Ontos heavy tank towards the center of the map. Geoff moved one of his Bulldog tanks to guard the objective of mine that I hadn't picked up yet. Then I went ahead and jumped my Wraith so that it was in base-to-base contact with both the objective and the Bulldog. With my Wraith now in short range, Geoff decided to stand still with his other Bulldog. And then he moved his Nodachi across the board in order to get into base-to-base contact with the Wraith. In response, I moved my Trebuchet across the opening to hide against another building. That kept the demolishers out of sight and allowed it to have a clean shot at the Nodachi. Unfortunately, it also allowed Geoff to move his overheated Lancelot into base-to-base contact with it. Then Geoff considered moving his Panther towards the fight in the center, but in the end he decided to move it along the left edge towards one of his objectives. And then to wrap up movement for the turn, I moved my Hunchback forward so that it could start taking shots into the central fight. Geoff opens up his attacks with his Nodachi. He swings its sword at my Wraith, and hits for 5 damage. With all of the Wraith's armor gone, his Bulldog that stood still takes a few shots at it, but everything misses. Then his Lancelot takes a swing at my Trebuchet, and hits for 3 damage. His other Bulldog opens fire on my Hunchback, but everything misses. And then for Geoff's last shooting of the turn, his Panther takes a shot at my Hunchback from the other direction. It deals 2 damage to it. I had my Trebuchet go first against the Nodachi, and it managed to hit with 3 damage. Then my Wraith took a swing at the back of the Bulldog tank it was next to, but it missed. And then for my last shooting of the turn, my Hunchback fired on the Bulldog that had stood still. Amazingly, all 6 damage are dealt and the Bulldog is destroyed. At the end of turn 3, Geoff has earned 5 points with his spider and then placed the objective back on the board. Meanwhile, my Wraith has picked up my 3rd objective. Having lost initiative again, Geoff opens up the turn by moving one of his demolishers forward. In hopes of making his objectives harder to grab, I moved my Ontos forward so that it had a clear line of sight to 2 of them. Then Geoff has his other demolishers sprint to try to physically cut off my Wraith's escape path. I jumped my Eris to the edge of the board with its objective. Geoff backed his surviving Bulldog up to a building, and then I jumped my Phoenix Hawk to the edge of the board with its objective, so that I'd be in position to score twice this turn. Geoff moved his Lancelot up to get into base-to-base with one of his objectives. In response, I moved my trebuchet into the nearby woods so that it'd be able to shoot at the Lancelot from there. On the other side of the board, Geoff moved his Panther up into position to grab another objective. Then I moved my Hunchback between two of the smaller buildings where it would be able to get a shot on the Lancelot without being too close to the Nodachi. And then my camera setup failed and stopped recording anything. For the rest of movement on turn 4, my Wraith moved over to the right where it was safely out of sight from anybody who could shoot at it. Then Geoff's Spider sprinted back to one of the objectives in hope of picking it up. And then shooting that turn was pretty brutal. Both my Hunchback and Geoff's Lancelot were destroyed. Both my Eris and Phoenix Hawk survived with their objectives at the edge of the board though. That gave me a score of 10 to Geoff's 5 at the end of the turn. If I would have done a better job reading the updates to the beta playtest, the game would have ended here. But I had confused some things between the original version and the update of the match play rules. And so we thought we were supposed to play until we had 3 objectives to win the game. During the extra turn that we played, my Wraith did make it to my board edge to score me another 5 points. My Ontos died a horrible death as Geoff's forces concentrated fire on it though. Despite the difficulties that we had, both with some misunderstandings of the rule packet and the technical difficulties while filming, I had a lot of fun with this game, and I'm looking forward to playing more games with the match play beta rules. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more from me, you can subscribe on YouTube, at scottsgameroom.com, or on Patreon. I'd also like to thank my backer at the supporter tier for helping to encourage me to keep making these videos.